For a great cup of joe, there's one thing you should know. Your morning brew can also be playful. Buff Boy Brewing guys make the temperature rise, and you surely feel naughty when you swallow our coffee. If you want some real heat, give your mouth a fine treat. You will want some more, rest assured. Buff Boy Brewing, you can't get enough of.
It's time for The Scribble, your weekly fix of celebrity chats, bizarre stories in the news, and basic random chatter with best-selling author and syndicated radio host Jeremy Bradley. Make sure your seat is in the upright and locked position and your barf bag is securely in place. Here's Jeremy Bradley.
Thank you very much, Larson. Jeremy Bradley here. This is The Scribble. Thanks for tuning in today. I just looked at the sheet of paper in front of me. Let me just start at the very beginning, because a few weeks ago during our December episodes, I commented that we were pre-taping a bunch of stuff leading up to the holidays, because it's sort of been a long-standing tradition that after American Thanksgiving, which is, end of November, at least in broadcasting anyway, we don't really work very much in December. So even when I was hosting our top 40, our syndicated radio shows, the top 40 show and then the country music show, we would generally pre-tape. And the reason we would be able to do that was because when it came to the Christmas advertising and all the, the different promos and like giveaways and things that we had, those were already arranged, I'm trying to think of when they were arranged. They were months in advance. I'm looking for Bonnie. She's not there, though. And so we just kind of got into the habit of, we've pre-taped all the Christmas stuff with celebrity guests and prize giveaways and everything like that, so we really don't have to do anything in December. And so with this podcast, we kind of did the same thing, where we said, all right, let's just wrap things up in, October, November, and call it a year. And so right now, the reason why I'm telling the story is because we're in the middle of taping, I think, like 6 of these today. And so it's November for me here, and it's, I believe, January for you as you're listening to this. But the point of the story is, on this sheet of paper in front of me, this is called the porn episode. And so I'm just laughing because by the time this goes live, we might have a very different name for the episode, but in our planning session, it was just called the porn episode. Oh, my family would be so proud of me right now. Anyhow, I'm going to explain, or am I explaining it now? See, I'm into the eggnog, everybody. No, we're going to talk about just how porn, I guess it's kind of been normalized nowadays, right? With things like OnlyFans, and it's called sex work, I guess. What is the definition of sex work? Does it mean actually having sex with people, or does it mean, is a stripper considered a sex worker? Right? Is that open for, I don't know. So I'm going to talk about porn for the next 30 minutes. There you go. All right, let's take a break. We'll start right after this.
Isn't it crazy that you wait for payday, but before you know it, you're strapped for cash again? It's time to stop blowing your money and become a smart spender with the book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate, at cheapskatebook.com. Learn simple ways to cut costs at home every day and during special times of the year. Don't go broke at Christmas. Don't remortgage the house for a fancy vacation. The book is filled with tips to save you money throughout the year. Check out the best-selling book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate, at cheapskatebook.com or on Amazon and iTunes.
Ever had something to get off your chest but never had the balls to say it? That's a load of crap. Speak Free with JB.com is exactly what you've been waiting for. Your chance to tell it like it is and not care what anybody else thinks. Have your say on issues of the day. Join newspaper and radio columnist Jeremy Bradley as he tells it like it is. Hundreds of thousands of people have stopped by, including some well-known celebrities who have had a chat with JB and speak candidly about what's really going on in the world. You can join them too. Have a rant or a rave. Be brave and head on over to www.speakfreewithjb.com now.
Jeremy Bradley here on The Scribble, talking porn today. And you know what I think is interesting is, and I know that, Facebook and Instagram Meta basically is very homophobic. And so, they see nudity as sex. They don't seem to differentiate the two of them. And so the gay community is very, very targeted when it comes to posting things on those platforms. But I've, I think as you get older, you kind of appreciate, you appreciate nudity. I don't see it as this, scary, dangerous thing. And it's when it's a regular adult, standing there. And I think too, because, I'm from a generation, I'm 42. When we were growing up, I mean, in the locker room, at the pool or whatever it was kind of just a big open area where there was nudity anyway, it wasn't, I don't know, there was nothing sexual about it, right? It was just, guys showering. Now, as a gay guy growing up, that changed though as I got a little bit older, but still, I mean, you kind of control yourself. It's not like you're, so it's interesting though how the views on nudity and sexuality have kind of changed, right? Because when you think about magazines like, Playboy, right? I watched that, I watched a documentary about Hugh Hefner and Playboy, and I didn't realize that, you'd think that he's just a dirty, creepy old man, but then you hear him described as a feminist, and I was like, wait a second, how does that work? Like, he's just, getting all these models and screwing them, and like, how is that female empowering? Because it almost seems like, I don't know, like a pimp, really, Now that I'm just saying, that was my opinion of him before watching this documentary and then kind of learning. And then there was also that A&E documentary where they kind of exposed all of the drama at Playboy. So there's there's kind of the two sides of it. The good that he did for certain people and I guess communities. I didn't know that he was a gay activist. I learned that, through watching these documentaries. So, what is considered pornography, right? Is a woman standing there naked, is that considered porn? Because now, by that definition, let's go back to the locker room for a second then, which is, that would be all porn. If you're surrounded by a room of porn, right? That's the logic in it. If it's simply a naked body equals porn, then you being naked, right? Now it's different than if you're, touching yourself in places or whatever. Okay, fine. Then that's porn. That's the sexual activity. So I've never understood, we've got my husband and I have a swimwear and underwear company. I've never understood, and we've fought Meta for years, and I know it's been publicly put out there as well, to have the company kind of explain, like, what is the sexual, what is the nudity and sexual activity for this post of, a picture of a guy, think again, my generation, the Sears catalog, you had pictures of a guy in his underwear 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But all of a sudden now we've kind of taken a step back, at least on those platforms, to go and say that a man standing in underwear, just standing in underwear, he's not touching himself, he doesn't have a boner, there's nothing, he's just a torso standing in underwear, is nudity or sexual activity. Now, we had the other day a post that got flagged and removed because it was, sorry, can we, if somebody can bring it up on my screen, the one that says it's condoning or encouraging sexual activity, do you guys have that still? Yeah. We have it as which? The photo may help arrange or encourage sexual activities. That was, Instagram removed a post that said the photo may help arrange or encourage sexual activities. So, like, think about that. A person is responsible for their own actions. So, like, that's almost like saying that you're inciting a riot, right? Like that we're doing something like January 6th here. Where it's a picture of a guy standing in underwear. That's dangerous. And they take you to the terms and policies or whatever you call it of the platform, and they basically go and say, like, well, it's for the safety of the community. Sorry, go back. How is this dangerous to the community in general? Where I've seen, and I've reported them too, I've seen animal fighting, like cockfighting on Facebook, reported it. It didn't get removed. We've seen, you've seen those videos of, kids getting the shit kicked out of them in the school bathroom, and, everybody has it, all the students have it uploaded to their page. That's okay. That's okay. But a pair of underwear is encouraging sexual activity. are you that like to me what that says is the gay community can't control its hormones. That's if you think people are just going to become unhinged and all of a sudden start going and molesting and raping and fucking everything that they see because of a picture of underwear, we've got a problem in society. I would say, I'm sorry, but that's just not that was a new one. We've seen, like I said, we've battled Meta for probably a good 4 years because the store is about 5 years old. So, well, maybe almost 5 years. And that's the first time that I've seen that warning, that it's encouraging sexual activity. But again, so you've got these busty bikini babes, right? These fluff heads that have the, massive jugs and, they have a wet bikini and you're sitting going, okay, so what is this telling the straight guys though? Is that it's telling you to buy this toolbox? Okay, yeah. No, there's nothing sexual about that at all. Nothing sexual. So, Meta, fuck off. That's all I gotta say. Meta, fuck you. Now, back to the porn thing. Actual porn. We were having a discussion here in our office because what office do you not have conversations about porn, right? And we were kind of discussing a couple different things: age, gender, and then just our generation. All of us here are at least 40, right? I'm not the, well, yeah, well, my husband is the youngest at 38, but whatever. Okay. So we're all well into our, 30s and 40s, 50s even here actually. And so, so male, female, straight and gay, like we've got the spectrum here. And we went around the room discussing porn. Just first of all, what it was like when you were a kid, because as I said, when I was 18 was a different time than when Bonnie Winters was 18 or Suzanne was 8. Our producers were 18 and they're also women. So it's a different story there too. And so, and especially too in high school or junior high, you're always kind of like, it's the boys that are the perverts, right? They're the ones looking at porn. And not so, according to the females with whom I spoke. They said, well, no, but their nudity, and we've heard this for a long time, is more about like the romance novels and things like that. So the more imaginative porn, we'd say, rather than just watching the hardcore stuff. So the women in the discussion said, no, the hardcore stuff wasn't for them, meaning their interest or their taste, but it was for the guys. And so I was asking the straight guys, well, was it kind of like, the Playboy magazine under your mattress or like, what was it? And yes, basically that's what it was that somebody, one of the group of friends would either, find a dad's Playboy or would have a friend who was old enough or a sibling who was old enough that would go and just buy one of the magazines from the convenience store, because that's what I remember too. I was 17 in 2000. I turned 18. So I remember, when you're a teenager, maybe even a little bit younger, and you kind of understand sort of what you're interested in. I knew that I never really had an interest in girls, but and remember, I'm putting the timestamp on this. Remember, we didn't have the internet, so there wasn't all this easy access to porn kind of a thing. But it's definitely something that you wanted to see, right? Yes, it was great to go to the pool and see, the guys in the shower. And maybe I did spend a lot of time, in the shower just kind of observing and looking because I knew that I liked what I saw. But what about the actual porn, though? So for me, it was really kind of interesting because I was hanging out with a group of straight teenage boys when I was that age, and they were kind of doing exactly what I was just describing, where we'd hang out like on a Friday evening, and we'd go to one of their houses, and up in the ceiling tile or up in like in the rafters, whatever you call it, in the basement, one of the guys had whatever a magazine anyway. And so, of course, kind of looking at it, and then, one would go into the bathroom for a little while, and I don't know that I really understood masturbation at the time, so I'm not sure. I'm guessing that's what they were doing, but I don't know. Or maybe it was just a matter of, looking at it and whatever. So I pretended like I was interested in it because I wasn't out. I didn't, it wasn't anything said. And I knew that the magazine really did nothing for me because I flipped through it and I was like, okay. So it must have been, I don't think it was anything that had like featured, like actual men, like, male and female couples. So, but I just remember always kind of pretending like, let's go look at it again. Meanwhile, Maybe that was also just my way of hoping that one of them would get, turned on and we might fool around. I don't know. I don't recall now at the time. But yeah, I was probably about 13 or 14, I guess. You have to remember that up until about when I was in grade 4, my friend Mike, he had a girlfriend and they kissed. And I remember thinking that was sex. So I was very, very behind on the times when it came to my understanding and my knowledge of stuff like that. And I had gone through my teen years and my 20s really single. I did not have a relationship. It's not that I was not out. I was just very not insecure. Well, I guess I was insecure. I was going through anxiety, depression. I was going through stuff at home. So I was not in a good place to be in a relationship. I pushed many, 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 many men away. So it's not that it wasn't for wanting a relationship. It was more just I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do the relationship thing. So, the Teenage Boy magazine in the rafters thing didn't really do anything for me. And then when I would go to convenience stores, you would always kind of look at the top corner, rack of the magazines because that's where the adult magazines were. And sometimes they would have the little shield in front of it, or they would have the magazine itself would be wrapped in plastic, right? So you couldn't actually see what the cover said. You could just see the name of the the masthead of it. And but when I was at the lake, so this is now I was probably about 15, maybe 16. The little store out by my parents' cottage had the adult magazines. And I remember, now the weird sort of layout of the store was that the magazines and the movie rentals, who remembers that, were kind of in like a corner. And the store that evening was sort of busy, lots of foot traffic. My plan was to steal the Playgirl magazine. I remember it said NYPD Nude as the headline on the cover. But again, it was on the top rack. And, you kind of didn't want somebody coming around the corner because, first of all, then here's a kid holding, an adult magazine. And then 2, if you're in the process of, I guess I was going to put it down my shorts. I don't know that I even had a plan. I think I just I would not have been a good shoplifter at that age. I would have been too terrified to get caught. But I saw that and I was just like, oh my God, I'm gonna take this thing and then, where do I go? What do I do? And I chickened out. I never did get it. And so that was my first attempt at looking at, something like that. And it just didn't happen. And then fast forward to when I was 17, I was working at Red Lobster. And that workplace was incredibly inappropriate. I mean, the restaurant manager was alleged. Well, I'm not naming him, so I don't have to say alleged, but it was rumored that the restaurant manager was, screwing half the waitresses, and that was kind of how you got the better shifts and, whatever was that. And he was also quite homophobic. But, and because the girls were kind of trashy at that restaurant, there was one day when we came in, I worked there with a couple of my high school peers. So sometimes we would, come in together. We would just go from school. We would just go into the restaurant. So when we got in the back area, in kind of the staff area, there was a little storage area as well. One of the women was flipping through a Playgirl magazine. And again, somebody had brought it in as a joke or whatever. So imagine being in your workplace and seeing a Playgirl magazine just sitting in the staff lounge, right? Like I said, we're going back to 1999. Not to say that it was right then, but it happened and there we go. So I remember taking note of that, going, I'm going to steal that thing tonight because I want that. That was like my first time that I was kind of, now, like I said, I was 16 or 17, I guess. Either way, late teens. And I just remember thinking, I've got to do this somehow, kind of either. It was kind of sitting on a bench in an area, but because it was the staff era on a weekend, there was just always somebody there, right? And then somebody had kind of just put it on a shelf, and I was like, well, okay, if I'm spotted coming out of this room or this area and it's not there after I left, what's the deal? And again, I was still in the closet, so that was also something to be scared of, really. And I eventually was able to grab it, and I just threw it in my backpack. And I was like, oh my God, I could not wait to get home with this thing. Like, this was, and again, there's the debate. Is this considered porn? Is it not? Whatever. So that was how I scored my first dirty magazine. And again, dirty is in the eye of the beholder, but, it was called a dirty magazine at the time. So that was my first experience getting my hands on a magazine. But I just remember the thrill and kind of the excitement of going into convenience stores throughout my teen years and just, kind of pretending that I'm looking at magazines, and then you look up to the top shelf. Oh, there's nothing here. All right, whatever. And I guess it was just more of the fantasy of it, more just kind of the excitement of, oh my God, it's right there. I never did ever try to buy one. It's not, because... And again, is a convenience store going to ID you for buying something like that? If I always really looked young anyway, so maybe it would kind of, especially too if you have to get boosted up to reach it, that might be a sign that you're not old enough, but whatever. And then coming home from Red Lobster, I had my first experience going into an adult store, an adult porn store, really. And I'm going to tell you about that coming up on the Scribble right after this.
It's never too early to start thinking about your next holiday. Have you checked out Mexico recently? From tequila tasting, swimming with horses, to ziplining through the jungle and watching whales and dolphins in their natural habitat, Puerto Vallarta has it all. Visit mexico.jbonair.com to see all the fun PV has to offer. That's at mexico.jbonair.com for hundreds of photos, interviews, and videos from around the tourist hotspot. Check out mexico.jbonair.com for all the fun. That's mexico.jbonair.com.
Who are the Kardashians feuding with now? What did that little thug Justin Bieber do this time? Who's getting hitched? And who's headed for Splitsville? Hear the latest celebrity news and gossip every day on Entertainment Wrap-Up. The good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly the ridiculously hilarious. It's all recapped in this daily segment at entertainmentwrapup.com. Have a laugh at the expense of the rich and famous when they take themselves way too seriously. It's 3 minutes of time-wasting fun at entertainmentwrapup.com. Check out Entertainment Wrap-Up at entertainmentwrapup.com. Brought to you by Speak Free Books.
JB here, back on the Scribble, talking porn, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. And by the way, let me give you the email address. Tell me your first porn story, your first porn experience. The email address is live@jbonair.com, live@jbonair.com. So I grew up quite a bit during my time at Red Lobster before I was fired, but that was my first experience with a Playgirl magazine. And then, and another thing, like I was talking about how you kind of would peep the magazines on the rack at the convenience store, same kind of a thing if you happen to be passing by one of those adult video stores. They always had the covered up windows so you couldn't see. But I always hoped that anytime that I was walking by one, that the door would open, right? Because you want to sort of see in and what is it, am I going to see something good? And I mean, from the street, passing on the sidewalk, probably not, but there was still that hope. You have to remember, like as a teenage boy with hormones surging, I mean, any of this kind of stuff would get you going, right? So there was one night when I was coming back, I was done my shift at Red Lobster. It was a weekend, so it was probably about 10. Well, no, we closed at 11 on the weekends. So, let's say it was 11:30 at night or so. Now, the bus that I would take home would alternate going down one street versus the next. It would still take me to my parents' house, but the way it got there, it either went down one busy street or the other busy street. And my parents' house was kind of in the middle between them. So it was like I could take them. One of them would be a shorter walk home, and the other one would be a bit of a longer walk home. Of course, I want the shorter walk when it's, coming to midnight. So I was just kind of like, whatever, I'm not even gonna, it was cold, I didn't want to, so I just got on the first bus that came, which happened to be the furthest away one. Well, the bus stop that I would get off at was pretty much right by an adult video store. And so the connecting bus that I could hop and just come home was still, at that time of the night, the buses are not coming very often in my neighborhood at home. So I was like, all right, well, I've got some time to kill. Oh, I don't know, now I was 17 at the time. So I kind of, you also sort of, like, how do I act? Do I make it seem like I'm in here all the time? Do you kind of look nervous? Like, what do you do? So I just open the door and just casually kind of walk in and just start looking around. Just like you would go to a normal video store. That's actually kind of what I thought. All right, well, I'm just going into Blockbuster. Not a big deal, right? I go to Blockbuster all the time. And you don't beeline to a certain area. Maybe you kind of look around, right? Just kind of casual. So I go and I'm looking kind of at like, the straight stuff or the girl porn. Because, we can't say what's straight and what's gay nowadays, as you know. Nevertheless, then I found my way to the adult. Now, this is the VHS tapes. This is how old we're going here. And so I was just kind of like, oh my God. Now, again, like I said, when you're seeing the covers of these and then you kind of pick them up and you look at the back of them, there was nudity on some of the cases. I mean, that was, almost having me ready to go. And so I'm kind of just browsing and looking around. And then this older guy, comes up, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh, good. And again, I'm like 17. I'm like dressed as, as a kid. You looking for something tonight? And I said, oh, just browsing. I know now what he was getting at. At the time, not a clue. So I was just like, just looking, and that was kind of it. He left me alone. There was nothing much more than that, and so I kind of felt awkward because here I am. I'm in this store. Like, I don't know. Do you rent them? Do you buy them? I didn't want to ask questions because, again, if I get ID'd or something that I'm underage, that could be trouble, right? And that's the last thing you want is, a porn store calling your parents. And then, you get busted not only looking at porn, you get outed as being gay, perhaps, too. So I was just, whatever. And I was later told that there were some stores like that you could rent them from or you could just buy them outright. So I get 2 of them and I go up to the counter. And I'm not kidding you, they were $70 each. $70 for fucking VHS tape of, a porn. And I mean, it's not even like a movie that you're sitting and watching, from beginning to end. So I go up there and he's like, oh, it's $140 something dollars. I paid it. I had my debit card or whatever it was that I had. And I bought 2 VHS tapes. And, so then I was like, okay, fine. Let me, put them in my bag. I've got them. And there was just something exhilarating about it. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I just remember being so warm that I ended up being able to walk all the way home that 20 minutes or whatever it was because I was on the far bus. Without any cold. I didn't feel like I was, because I was just so warm. I was just like, oh my God, I did this. This was an adrenaline rush, really. So I get home. And I had my own room, so that was fine. It wasn't a thing about privacy. And I had my own VCR and everything, too, in my room, so I was good with that. But here's the thing. Now, when you've got your own room, but the way my room was set up was that my TV was... As soon as you open the door of my room, you can see the TV. So you have no warning if all of a sudden somebody just is, right outside your door and just opens the door. Because in my house, you did not get a door knock. The door just opened is really what happened. So, you're taking your life in your hands, literally. Oh, that's dirty. So it's, you do this at your own risk. You maybe wait until you're home alone or, everybody's already in bed. You're definitely not doing this when, the house is alive, right? So because it was, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and me getting home at that time, like I said, the restaurant closed, so it wasn't uncommon for me to get home at that time, because that's, and if the bus didn't come or whatever, and I had to wait for the next one, whatever, it wasn't, no questions asked. I wasn't worried about that. But because it was already so late, well, I only had to wait about a half hour before everybody was already gone to bed, and I just remember, this is my first, porno video that I'm watching. Again, we didn't have, the internet and all that stuff to watch and to explore and to experience as a teenager. And I experienced, I think, what kind of the first thing the guys experience is, you're not watching the 70-minute porn. You're getting through maybe 3 minutes of it. You're fast forwarding until there's the nudity and whatever. And as a teenage boy, you're done. That's really what it was. And well, to this day, I don't have a VCR anymore anyway, but I'm saying for the amount of time that I had a VCR, I never did watch both of them. I never did watch the entire video. I think I just kind of fast forwarded it to, a certain part that I liked, and then that kind of just, did me in every time. I don't even know that I went 20 minutes into the video. And so, but money well spent, I would say so, because you have to realize that because you don't have any other... because there's so much porn on the internet, you can, watch one thing and then you don't have to watch it again because you can find 50 more of the same thing, right? Or something else. So for that, I mean, you're going to watch it over and over again because that's the only tool that you have, if that's the right word to use. So, yeah, but I mean, and I think here's the deal. You could say about children watching porn or whatever, but you know what? I wasn't going and screwing around. I wasn't going and hooking up with strangers. I mean, my first kiss I was probably 19, 20. So I was not one of these kids, I hear now that they've got like daycares and everything in school because, and I pass these teenage girls pushing strollers when I'm out walking my dogs or whatever. And I just look at that and go, wow. I remember it was in grade 9, one of the girls in my class, Arlene, had a boyfriend, and she was the only one that had sex. It was one time, and that was kind of the big deal. Oh my God. And so that was grade 9, or 9th grade, as Americans say. Canadians say grade 9. High school, I mean, I think that you were kind of like fooling around. I know, like, my friend Greg talked about like fingering a girlfriend, but there was no intercourse. And I knew a lot of people. I was quite social. I was very popular. I think it was grade 12. That was, your last year in school is kind of when people were about 17, 18 years old is when it was starting to happen. Nowadays, I mean, really, it's happening in very, very early grades. So would I prefer my kid, checking out porn and, exploring his body safely at home and whatever? Okay, fine. Rather than going out and, having risky, sexual behavior with strangers and hookups from the internet and whatever, right? You sort of look at the two options. You always kind of see that on TV where, they're going to have sex anyway, so you might as well give them the condom so it's safe. Well, I mean, there's other alternatives to that though, too, right? I'm not preaching, abstinence or whatever, because, I mean, once I was in my 20s, I certainly was, doing things for attention and to, get guys to like me, which was also the wrong thing. So, I'm not a hypocrite to say that. But my goal in life, by the way, was to actually wait until I was in a very, very serious relationship and potentially married. But that's just also kind of what a lot of people felt back then. So that was my first experience going into a porn store. So back to that discussion, though, that I was having with our group here, and, your first, sort of experience, seeing, pornographic content or nude content. One of the gals said that it was in junior high where there was a female gym teacher, not a lesbian, I'm not going there, but she had confiscated, it was playing cards, a deck of cards that had guys in underwear and, tight swimwear, and there were a couple of nude cards. Like, I think it was like the Joker, or like the, the King, or what, like the higher up cards had nudity. And so there was this rumor, kind of rumblings, that she had confiscated it from somebody and that the deck of cards was in her desk drawer. And so, it was kind of like, the girls were all kind of wanting to see this. Of course, the guys weren't, but, the girls were like, oh my God, there's going to be like, muscle guys and whatever. So they waited for her to leave the room. And then somebody had gone to kind of just, quickly check the drawers. Again, in high school, unless somebody's like watching the doorway, you don't know when the teacher's coming back in the room. But basically had found this, sure enough, confirmed that there's this deck of cards. But it wasn't the entire deck. So which was, I guess, apparently funny, going, well, what happened to the other ones? Where's the, But it was confirmed. And so that was her first experience looking at, naked or very close to naked men, was in these cards. So it's kind of interesting how, is it something that you sought out? Is it something that just kind of you stumbled upon and then, it fell in your lap, so to speak? Or, what was it, right? So from my experience and conversations with people, it's that the boys were seeking it out, and the girls were more just, well, if it happens, and again, they were more into the sort of the romantic thing. So do we have to, you're telling me to go already? Let me quickly tell the Jeannie story, because I was just, okay, so Jeannie Frand, one of our producers, I'd gone to college with her, and so she was talking about how she's, how many years older than me? You guys have me flustered because you're telling me to go and then you're telling me to stay and finish the story, so I don't know what we're doing. I'm going to keep going and then we'll wrap up. So Jeannie is a couple years older than me. I believe she's maybe close to 45. Anyhow, so we were, we're of the same generation. And she was telling me that in school, junior high, the girls were keeping diaries because Backstreet Boys and NSYNC was the big thing at the time, that were keeping diaries about marrying the Backstreet Boys. It wasn't about having sex with the Backstreet Boys. It was just being in this loving relationship, this romantic, that I'm going to marry him. We're going to be together. We're going to have children, which is kind of funny, right? Because the dream is the children, not the actual sex part of it. But again, that's just what the generation, how the generation was. And so Jeannie was saying that it was more kind of the fantasy of the life together, which then was more of the turn on. And so I asked her, I said, well, okay, so what if there were, let's say, naked pictures of the Backstreet Boys? Was that something that you would have been looking for? Like, had the internet existed, do you think that girls in your class or in your age would be typing in Backstreet Boys nude and something like that? And she said, no, probably not. It's not something that probably would have been done. So interesting, right? How boys will, seek it out and, pool our money together and go buy a magazine and get the brother to buy it and put it up in the rafters, versus the girls that were kind of just like, I like kind of reading the romance novel and the sweetness of it and the caring and the tenderness. And then that's when the sex happens. That's when. So again, live@jbonair.com is the email address. We're out of time already. This is bye-bye. They're waving bye. All right. This is the Scribble. I will talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.
We hear you chirping. Get scribbling. Tweet up the Scribble at The Scribble Show. Join the discussion with Jeremy Bradley. It's all going down right now on Twitter at The Scribble Show and at thescribbleshow.com. Want more Scribble? Check out thescribbleshow.com for past shows, celebrity interviews, cheapskate tips, and more. That's at thescribbleshow.com and on Twitter at The Scribble Show. The Scribble is a speak-free media presentation.
If you want some real heat, give your mouth the